Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second town hall hosted by Creating Abundance Collaborative. Today, we're really excited to explore the intersection of creative youth development, mental health, and the social and emotional benefits that CYD brings. Thank you all for introducing yourselves in the chat and completing our poll. Here are the poll results, which shows the diversity of the group. My name is Alana. I'll be your host and moderator for today. I'm an artist mentor and program coordinator at the David's Heart Foundation. This topic is important to me because I get to experience firsthand how creativity impacts the lives of young people in my community. The David's Heart Foundation is a nonprofit organization that uses multimedia and production to empower young people. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm ready to share, learn, and connect with you all. Okay, so here's today's plan. We're going to begin by highlighting a few of the Lewis Prize for Music's key findings from their analysis and their applications from over the past 5 years, demonstrating the CYD sector's commitment to the well-being of young people. Next, Brandon Stepp from the David's Heart Foundation will follow by showcasing effective strategies for engaging young people and collaboratively evaluating their holistic well-being through their programs. This will be followed by our panel of experts from diverse fields such as adolescents, mental health, youth workforce development to consider the implications of prioritizing CYD's approaches. We're then going to break into smaller groups to have discussions so we can all dive deeper together. Then we're going to reconvene back to our findings and then wrap up the event. Okay, so some quick housekeeping rules. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time during the event, and we're going to address them as they come up. Please note that this session will be recorded for promotional purposes, and then after the event, we will send out a follow-up email with the event recording, key takeaways, additional resources, and a feedback survey. Closed captioning is available, so please enable it if needed. Okay, let's get started. Let me introduce to you all Alexis Jackson, Data Analysis Officer with the Lewis Prize for Music.
Hi, hello everybody. Alexis Jackson, so happy and excited to be here with you all today. I am with the Lewis Prize for Music. I'm calling in from New Orleans, Louisiana. I focus in on our data, our research, and our analysis work with our awardees and our grantees. I have a background in dance performance, dance education. I've taught and performed across the Southern and rural United States, and now I'm really focused on really understanding CYD and the amazing work that our programs are doing. And so I'm going to walk us through a little bit of the data behind the Lewis Prize and what we've learned most recently through all of our work with our awardees, but also just by understanding the characteristics of the programs that have been applying to our prize process and through the different research efforts that we've undergone. The first thing we're going to go through is just a quick overview of what CYD is. CYD, here we have a definition from the CYD National Partnership. Creative Youth Development is a commitment to supporting young people's stories, ideas, and dreams through creative expression and honoring their lived experience. They say that those three concepts that must be present are racial equity and social justice, youth voice, and then collective action. And again, that's coming from the CYD National Partnership. You can check out more from their website. what we've been working through is not just understanding what creative youth development is, but how that differs from the different ranges of what arts education programming is out there. And so through our work, we've also really pulled out some of these other key components that are key characteristics of CYD. We've done this through 3 of our research papers, not just the producing well-being, but also through our COVID research paper that came out 2 years ago, as well as our rural think tank research paper that came out just this past year. And we've seen just these 4 strong characteristics, and those are providing direct services to young people. So not just the fact that the art is centered within the programming and not on the sidelines, but so are those additional programming and support systems that leaders are providing, such as mentoring programs, different social support services, tuition-free programming, transportation accessibility. How are they centering that work alongside the artistic work? Additionally, how are these leaders supporting youth-led movement building within programming? So how are they creating space for young people to use their artistic expression to make art about the things that matter to them? And how are those leaders directly supporting them with that work? Additionally, how are they engaging in these deep community partnerships? So how are they really utilizing their community and collaborating with their community to not only support the young people, but within that support, create some systems level change, even on the local, regional scale, political scale, through school systems, things like that, really seeing how their work has not only impacted beyond the young people, but with their community as well. And then also we're seeing that they're focusing on these strong internal equity or these strong justice orientations. So for us, that looks like seeing how they're centering what DEI looks like for them, how they're centering representative staff, board, teaching artist level members in the community, how they're centering alumni voice in their work, really seeing how that is what's upholding the art as well. What's been also really exciting for us is really understanding that it's also BIPOC-led orgs who are doing this work, and also programs that are having that multi-genre music programming. We're finding that music production, hip hop, and songwriting are some of those stronger or some of the most strongly seen music genres in the programs that are being moved through our process, but are also having a more deeper connection with these other characteristics. On the right here, I just have a few figures that we found just from our awardees. So in thinking of what these core characteristics are, we found that over 70% of our awardees focus on ensuring that their staff and board are representative of their community, that they're also providing culturally responsive pedagogy and programming for the young people throughout the years. And also they really focus on supporting transportation and accessibility for their program. Additionally, of all of our accelerator awardees, all of them are supporting youth-led movement building, but they're also really honing in on racial justice and also cultural preservation movement specifically. In terms of the direct services that are being provided, 83% of our awardees are providing youth employment and workforce training in some way and shape and form within their programming as well. And then looking at who is providing that with all of these things, it's BIPOC leaders. At 74% of our awardees are BIPOC-led who are focusing on this incredible work. Next, we're actually going to move through, I'm going to show you 2 different views of the direct services that are being provided. So here on the left, you're going to see a ranking of the grouping of direct services that are being provided by our applicants. And so in our application process, and which has evolved over time, and through that we've learned how to ask the questions to learn those deeper characteristics, but we've grouped them into seeing what different levels of direct services are being provided and at the rate. And so this purple bar is going to represent the 179 programs out of the 665 programs that applied through our system. That 179, they have reached that second level of our process or gone beyond that. It's about 27% of the full pool, but throughout any sort of pre-filtering or pre-identification, we found that after the process, when we went back and looked at those characteristics, that those 179 were outranking those that did not progress in almost every direct service that's being provided through the applicant pool. So we're seeing that pretty much even or about level is that mentoring program and that social connection programming. But we're also seeing that at a high rate, these programs are providing youth employment and workforce training, academic support, services such as on-site social health worker, providing family support, income support, housing, food and security support. Technology access is a huge direct services being provided as well. Mental health services, transportation, really everything, almost in every category. We're seeing that there are these programs that are centering art, but also highly centering providing these direct services. And the next view of this ranking is also going to be showing the BIPOC leadership within these group of organizations. So we're finding that the BIPOC leaders are also really focusing on providing direct services. So we're seeing with mentoring program and social connection programming, it's about even, or it is even with white and BIPOC leaders. But when we get to youth employment, academic support, social services support, again, that they're outranking white leaders at almost 30% in some cases and providing these direct services. And again, that this was determined not by doing any pre-identification, but throughout the process, really trying to see where those breakpoints and what progresses, not only a program through our process, but what we're seeing as really having those systems change level impacts on their community. And so what we're saying here is that not only should we be focusing on programs that are centering direct services and uplifting them, supporting them, but also how are we supporting who is doing this work, which is BIPOC leaders, those programs that are focusing again on direct services, really providing those current and responsive programming for the young folks in their program. And there's so much more here with data to learn, but I think for the topic of conversation today, it's as we're looking at how we're supporting young people and how we're really giving them agency with CYD programming. It's looking at what other elements of the music programming are really uplifting this work and providing some systems level change. Thank you. And I'll move on to Brandon.
Thank you, Alexis, for sharing. If you have any questions for Alexis, please drop them in the chat now. I'm now pleased to introduce Brandon Stepp, the founder and executive director of the David's Hart Foundation.
All right. First off, Alana's dope. I just want to acknowledge that. I was over here like, man, she's killing it. Yeah, so my name is Brandon Stepp, and in lieu of a formal introduction, I would like to, if it's okay with you, use the language of our community, which is hip hop, to be able to rap a little bit about who I am. So without further ado, I am the great grand of a great lady who sang the blues, who moved out west with my grandmother when she was 2. Granddaddy's mom left Kentucky, 3 sons escaped abuse. Maternal magic in music is like my sinews. I am a son of Southeast San Diego, tried and true. Mama told me she'd break my hand, she see me banging blue. I am red, black, and green. Black pride was all I knew, till I grew to love a brother of another hue. I am a husband of 1. I am a father of 2. I am an elder now, big bro to more than a few. I am a servant leader, learning to speak love and truth. Our programming is relevant. Of course, we partner with the youth. I am a living temple. I wake up way too soon. I am salt and light. I am broken just like you, yet all I need in this life is sin. I am many things to many. I'm nothing without I am. All right. So with that, let me catch my breath. I'm getting too old to rap. But yeah, so my name is Brandon Stepp. Just real quickly, Alana mentioned I'm the founder of the David's Hart Foundation, which means I was the guy in the garage recording studio that started this journey in 2006 after leaving a corporate job. I stepped out on faith and I left that job. I created a recording studio in my neighborhood in Southeast San Diego. And in the process, I learned a lot about myself, and a group of young people truly changed my life. And so this is actually the recording studio. That young man in the back is Austin. And when Austin came into that space for the first time, I got a chance to watch this young person not only trade his good grades for recording studio, because that was the catch at the time, but to allow to see this young man actually really start to develop a different identity as an artist, coming from a gang affiliated background. And for me, I got a chance to understand a little bit about that and wanted to mentor him. And through the process, I discovered I was a really terrible mentor. You know, I was just trying to tell the young person what to do, but really quickly through a really tragic moment in my life where my wife was diagnosed with bilateral cysts on her ovaries as she was pregnant with our first daughter. Um, I got a chance to continue to go back to that recording studio space, and I realized really quickly that I was really struggling to be a mentor. So I took that mask off and allowed those young people into that moment in my life, and realized that they then were willing to walk with me, and they started to take their masks off and allowed a conversation to happen. And so Flashlight First was the first lived experience pillar of our community. And we say we all have a flashlight. We can either shine it on youth or we can shine it on ourselves. If we shine it on ourselves as adults, we allow youth to see who we are. They get a chance to decide whether or not they want to walk in that light with us. And so that was the first lived experience of our community. But since then, we've developed many other lived experiences that we call our pillars of community. This is really important to understand before I get into this slide, because as a creative youth development organization, what we're doing is we're using the platform of art to be able to really create authentic community. And that begins with understanding not only who we are, but also what we stand on, and the lived experiences as a community. Every single year we get away as a community to put another lived experience up. You see Flashlight First up there. The rest of them have come as a result of walking in community with young people. You'll see Common Unity, that came as a result of rival gangs being in the space and figuring out how we were going to live in unity and center art. People over property happened when we had an issue where we had to prioritize people, or were we going to prioritize property in the things in this really cool space and recording studio space that we have. And as you go around, you get to see walking through the mud, being able to walk through the juvenile justice system with young people, and Keepers of the Cocoon, being able to hold space as young people struggle, leaving the door open, that allowing them to always come back in. And then Celebrate Success. The kids say, no losers, just lessons. And so that's been our journey. And just a real quick kind of side note about the David's Harp Foundation. So we use the power and platform of music and media production to meet young people where they are. They love that. They come into the space with that. And as they do, they have an opportunity to interact with trusted adults. And so we've developed what we call a pedagogy of relationship. What is our practice of actually being in relationship with young people? So those pillars that you see are now our foundation, right, of the building that is a community. A lot of times the systems that the young people come out of want to see this top level success, which is a graduation and employment, or a termination of probation, entrepreneurship. For us, our entrance is music and media and artistic expression. And with that comes system navigation, love, and advocacy for young people. And then the next phase up from that is creative vulnerability. What is it like for you to really try something different, to see yourself in a different space? And then re-engagement. We're asking young people and then challenging them to re-engage in some of the systems that have just honestly failed them. Up from that is the confidence to expand and articulate your personal vision. In our community as well, that's a professional vision, as young people are founding businesses in our community. We have 5 youth founded businesses that are currently at Sony right now shooting a corporate video. And then lastly, we get a chance to see that those successes, but it's really important to understand that all of this stems from genuine, honest relationship with young people, and prioritizing that relationship at every juncture is exactly what we major in. And so what that looks like, I mentioned young people are now in a workforce program. I just want to introduce you to a young man named Delano, who was able to recently step outside of our community to do some work. And here we go. All right.
What's the deal? It's Delano McKee Cartwright, and I'm going to let you all in on my point of view of the NEKC 5 opportunities of equitable youth justice in Houston, Texas. So for me, getting on the plane for a business trip is something I would have never thought of months ago. Just being able to sit at the table and talk about issues, about what's working and what's not working with probation and juvenile justice all around the country was super important for me, and just knowing that my voice is valuable. All the hard work that I've been putting in and stepping outside of my comfort zone is to be a part of something greater than myself. But ultimately, it's putting myself into a position to make some real money. I take pride in what I do, because whatever I do, I put my all into it. I'm infatuated with learning the cinematic look and advancing in rake and skill in the field of work that I'm in. But also being able to show other youth my age that it is possible to be successful with tattoos on your face and a record. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with the NEKC Foundation in the future. This has been my point of view. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and as always, stay tuned for more.
All right. So that's Delano. Delano is a very special young person. I'm having a hard time advancing the slide, but there we go. Thank you very much. All right. So real quick, what does relationship-centered workforce training look like? It looked like what Delano just said. It looks like really stopping and thinking about identity. And so Delano came into our space with the primary identity of a Crip. And that was his primary identity when he walked in. But what we've got a chance to see is Delano really develop into a content creator. And, you know, we didn't initially want to do a workforce program. That's not something that I really desired to do. But when young people step forward and say, hey, how can we make money doing the things that we love? We just responded. And I think that that's absolutely what the Lewis Prize was talking about when they did this research. Being able to listen to young people's voice, to be able to step up to meet them in those spaces where they want to be, to walk with them in partnership and link arms on what we call walk through the mud through systems at the same time is really what it is. At the end of the day, it comes down to, are you willing to prioritize young people where they want to be, who they are, and then come alongside that. And that's exactly what the community is here. I really hope that you've taken away something as far as a practice in relationship, because ultimately I think that that's what our kids need. That's how they're going to be able to realize the dreams that they have, but also to be able to really facilitate their walk through these really raggedy systems. So in that case, I just want to say thank you very much, and go ahead and thank you for that extra 2 minutes and 22 seconds, Lewis Prize, and I will pass it on back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for that informative presentation. If anyone has any questions for Brandon, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them shortly. Now, I would like to welcome our esteemed panel of guest speakers. We're honored to have them to share their insights and experiences with us here today. I'll ask them to make a short introduction and then we'll dive into some questions. First up, let's welcome Dr. Adriana Galvan, Professor of Psychology, Dean of Undergraduate Education, Co-Executive Director for the Developing Adolescent at UCLA.
Thank you. Hi, am I on? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's really wonderful. Thank you for that introduction, Brandon. That was so inspiring and wonderful. And it's interesting that we come to the work from such different places. As you can see on the slide, I am a neuroscientist by training. I got my BA at Barnard College and my PhD in neuroscience. And my research is focused on how we set the stage and set the environment to help young people navigate the transition into adulthood. And a lot of it is the same principles that you describe, which is that they need authentic community support, authentic mentoring, meeting young people where they are, listening to young people. And so if you can advance the slide, please. I am co-executive director at UCLA for the Center for the Developing Adolescent. And what we aim to do is to align the science and policy to create conditions that help young people thrive. And what we learn is that by incorporating the developmental needs of young people, we can address policy questions or science that relates to young people by listening to the intersectional opportunities to connect science, the lived experience, and the storytelling. What stories are we telling about young people that sometimes are antithetical to the goals that we aim to do, which is to serve them by meeting them where they are? Slide, please. And one of the core principles I'll be talking about today with my fellow panelists is this notion that the connections that are increasing as young people become adults or as when they are adolescents, the connections out in the community mimic and are reflective of the brain development connectivity, the connections that are happening within the brain. So some of you may know that the brain continues to develop through the mid-20s. And what we mean by that is not that the brain continues to expand in size, but that the connections among different brain regions are there to support the increasing connections that young people see between themselves and their communities. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Adriana. Next, we have Dr. Nia Imani Fields, Deputy Director of National Youth Employment Coalition.
Thank you so much. And I am so honored and excited to be here and hear from all of my fellow presenters. I am always inspired to hear from the good folks doing this work. I'm with the National Youth Employment Coalition, and my years of experience are in youth development, social justice, social capital, and thinking about the whole child, the whole young person, as we think about any of the positive outcomes. Back to that upper roof, if we're aiming to get to the economic mobility and to the college and career success, or whatever success looks like for a young person, there are some things that matter to all people, particularly those who are in the development stages. So I'll share a little bit about our organization. The National Youth Employment Coalition is a national nonprofit. It's a member-based organization that coalesces 200 members and partners across the country who serve thousands of young people with the support of thousands of youth development practitioners, workforce practitioners. We focus primarily on 3 big buckets. One is capacity building. That's bringing people together for shared learning, workshops, annual conferences. We have youth-led workshops as well, reports and research, and tons of information that you can find on our website. We also focus on policy and advocacy, working alongside our members to uplift what is necessary, amplifying the voices at the local, state, and federal level to ensure that policies and regulations around workforce and overall youth development are in the best interest of those who are often disconnected and not plugged into resources across communities. And then the third is through youth leadership. So we have a youth advisory council, we have youth-led workshops and grants to support youth-led initiatives in community. And we have actually an event coming up this September in DC called Youth Days, where young people are getting prepared to go out on the Hill and advocate for what's important to them. So we hope that we will see some of you there or connected to NYC in some way. I was asked to talk a little bit about our project called the Youth Champion Communities Mayor's Challenge, and it essentially is saying it takes all of us to support young people, right? It's not anyone's sole responsibility to ensure that our children, our young people are protected, are supported, and are prepared for life today and in their future. So we have this project where we are challenging mayors, we are challenging communities, workforce intermediaries, our legislators, our youth-led organizations, our education system, and all of those systems that are at play here. We're challenging us all to think differently about what a young person's possibility is. And we've developed a framework alongside community with some key ingredients of what it looks like, along with some strategies and tools along the way. Here's just a sample of one of the domains out of 7 that we have identified. This one is around holistic supports, and it's most closely aligned with today's conversation. But there are things that are needed for a young person to thrive as we think holistically. Understanding what the barriers are, whether it's transportation, whether it's food, whether it's access to quality education, and then providing those wide range of supports, and then partnership across community through the arts, education, workforce partners, and so forth. So I'm glad to be on with you all today and chat more about this through our Q&A session. And I will pass it on to my next panelist.
Thank you so much, Nia. Lastly, let's welcome Amy Price, Program Executive at the Zellerback Family Foundation.
Thanks, Alana. Also super honored to be here and feel a little bit like an imposter and like I could learn more from all of you than you from me. So thank you for the invitation and happy to be here. My background and all my work really has been in systems change work, really focused on youth and family serving systems. And I think maybe most of my expertise in this area comes from dancing as a youth and young adult and having a mother and grandparents who were artists, which helped me to recognize the critical role that art plays in human development. I now have the privilege of working at the Zellerback Family Foundation, which has long supported community arts and systems change efforts, primarily focused on youth justice, child welfare, and behavioral health systems, as well as immigration systems. And within the last couple of years, we began more intentionally supporting efforts that employ arts and culture as tools for healing, advocacy, and creating a sense of belonging and community. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to briefly review our approach, which came from a strategic planning process that we engaged in over the last about 2 or 3 years ago. It's very small, so I think I can't see the chat, but I think there's a link in the chat. Just to walk you through this real quickly, we had a very siloed approach prior to this planning process that we went through, which honestly was the first formal planning process that we went through in about 65 years. I have not been here that whole time, but since the foundation has been here. We had a very siloed approach. This new strategic framework really takes a more integrated approach that really has the bedrocks of diversifying art and cultural expression, building power, transforming public systems, and promoting collective healing. And we have 3 sort of strategic buckets in that: expression, which includes community arts, as well as narrative change; action, which includes base building, organizing, advocacy, collaborative efforts; and imagination, creating the space to imagine something beyond what we currently have, because what we found is that so much of system work looks like tweaking at the edges of a fundamentally flawed system instead of really creating space to imagine something fundamentally different. I think importantly, we have these 2 buckets now. One we call safety and belonging, centering the lived expertise to transform child, family, and immigrant serving systems; and arts and culture, to ensure that the voices, experience, traditions, and dreams of all individuals can be celebrated. What isn't reflected here is our new collaborative effort, which supports work that very intentionally uses arts, as I mentioned earlier, to promote the systems change, to support healing, and to support advocacy. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I think that some of the work that we support through this new strategy speaks for itself better than I could possibly speak. So just to highlight a few examples, 67 Sueños is run by and for young people who are undocumented or of mixed status. It centers organizing, political education, trauma healing, and artivism to provide leadership development and center youth voices through storytelling, art, videos, etc. They have created murals all over the city of Oakland. Similarly, Bay Peace, also led by and for young people, offers leadership programs to empower Bay Area youth to transform and heal from systemic violence and intergenerational trauma. And they engage in efforts to transform their communities through holistic education and creative expression, such as spoken word, movement, and theater of the oppressed. RISE is a full-service community center developed by and for young people to build their power by creating safe spaces for youth to love, learn, educate, heal, and transform their lives and communities. And a key part of that is extensive art programming, which includes performing arts, music, video creation, dance, storytelling, and artivism. A little bit differently, Beats, Rhymes, and Life, which I think sounds somewhat akin to what Brandon's work does, uses hip-hop therapy, which partners hip-hop artists with clinicians to engage youth in their schools and communities wherever they are, to reduce the stigma around mental health and increase access to culturally congruent, youth-centered approaches to healing. They also have a mobile studio that goes to where young people are so that they can come in and create art and heal through that process. Five Elements also uses hip hop along with ethnic studies, healing circles, cultural programming, and civic engagement to develop social emotional learning and inspire self-determination among youth of color in low-income communities in San Francisco. And finally, here, and a little bit different from the others, East Bay Center for the Performing Arts engages young people in imagining and creating new worlds for themselves and new visions for their communities through active creation of original music, theater, dance, and media, coupled with self-determined community projects. They, right now, as an example, are creating a student musical film highlighting the housing crisis in Richmond, California. So I am going to stop there, and I'm happy. I look forward to further discussion with all of you and happy to answer any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. We'll now move into our interactive time together to ask critical questions that can help us further bridge CYD holistic well-being efforts. If you have questions for the group, please drop them in the chat. Okay, we're going to start with the first question. How can the CYD approach meet adolescents' developmental needs, and how might CYD practices strengthen this in non-CYD activities? Initiatives, sorry. I'm going to read that one more time. How can the CYD approach meet adolescents' developmental needs, and how might CYD practices strengthen this in non-CYD initiatives?
I can maybe kick us off. Thank you for the question, Alana. We've heard a few times from all of the folks on the call today how important it is to think of the child and young person in a holistic way, and meeting young people where they are, understanding what their unique needs are. I often give the analogy of not having a one size fits all to the approach that we take with young people. I often share, like, I'm not good with keeping plants alive, like my husband does that. And I just assume every plant needs the same amount of water, same amount of sunlight, and they should thrive. Well, half of my plants end up dead. So clearly I'm doing something wrong. Now that's an extreme example, but it's just a reminder that every child has unique experiences, unique needs. And this idea of CYD allows the space to be creative in how we meet those needs and understand what those needs are and provide relevant resources without the assumption that we give everyone the same thing and they should achieve the same outcomes.
I will also add, thank you for the question, that it's being responsive to what's happening in a young person's life during that time. Often creative expression emerges during this time, not to say that younger kids do not have it or older people are also not obviously creative, but sometimes young people, through their identity finding exercises or identity development, learn that creative expression is their outlet for whatever, for pleasure, for mental health, for whatever it is. And so it is being developmentally responsive to where they are.
I'm not sure I have anything to add to what's already been said. I do think that a lot of the groups that we fund don't come at it necessarily as an artistic organization. They exist to transform systems, to advocate for change, and they find that the way to engage young people and make it meaningful for them and to connect them both to the work, to themselves, and to each other is through creative expression in different ways that resonate for young people.
Thank you. Our next question is, why is building relationships fundamental to achieving positive outcomes with teens and young adults? How does creative learning and presentation support this process?
I'll start again. There's an expression that everyone has heard, likely, or most people, that it's not what you know, but who you know. And it's knowing that people care. And even as adults, those relationships are important to us. If we think back to our own childhoods and young adult development years, we can think to people who cared about us and who might have changed the course of the decisions that we made. Relationships are critically important, and young people often won't be vulnerable. Adults often won't be vulnerable until they know that you care about them. Creative youth development allows you to be creative in what care looks like, how you communicate with one another, and what's acceptable in terms of communication and expression. So it's the easiest thing we can do, listening and learning from one another, but it's often skipped over, and moving to the technical side of the work. And we have to spend more time in building relationships with one another. So it's the roots of all of this work.
And I think someone earlier said, I'm not sure who, that all of the work that we want to do to support young people stems from genuine, honest relationships. And so it's not simply having opportunities for interaction, but building the relationship in a way that builds trust, because we need trust, as you note, Nia, in every space. As adults, we need trust in the workplace, we need trust in our personal relationships. Not simply to have authentic relationships, but trust will only be sought out by those for whom we believe will help us when we are in need of help. And so that's how we can support young people as well.
Again, I think everything happens in relationships. And I think, Brandon, you gave such a great example at the beginning of, when we as adults make ourselves vulnerable, then it allows young people to as well. And I think creative arts also allows young people to show up as their genuine selves and not hide behind something that they think they're supposed to be or some way that they're supposed to show up. And to express themselves fully and genuinely.
Why is it so beneficial that the trusted relationships and CYD programs include adults actively listening to young people?
I'm happy to start with that one. I think that if we don't, we end up with systems that don't work for young people and that young people don't trust and don't access. And so we can have the most brilliant programs created by adults. And if they're not centered by the experiences of young people, they're not, the young people won't access them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll add, it's important as adults, to recognize that we don't know it all, despite our years of wisdom and experience. First, myself, and I have to remind myself the world was very different when I was his age compared to today. So we have to be humble enough to know we do not know it all, to allow space to learn from young people and not assume that we are just depositing knowledge into them, but we are leaving room and space for them to educate us as well and amplify their voices and, honor their voices, whether that's through paid opportunities, whether that's through amplifying their names when we share the wisdom from them. But we have to be more vulnerable and humble as adults to provide that space.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists for those insightful comments. We're now going to transition into our breakout sessions where we can further connect and discuss today's topic. All right. Today's question for each group is, what changes are needed to evaluate CYD program outcomes to reflect the importance of relationships and the creative process? Each group's going to have an opportunity to share their findings during the breakout groups and then report back.
Alana, are you there?
Yes.
My group in breakout 7 was looking for the wording to the question. We didn't get it written down in time.
Okay.
I've just
Are
shared it
you
into the room. So if it's on the screen here, and if you go back into your room, you'll see it there as well. But I can, oops, it is. So you should be able to see it in your room now.
Okay, I'll go back to the room then. Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had some engaging discussions in your groups. Let's hear some of those highlights.
Hello, Pat White.
I could share something. I think.
Hello.
Go for it.
Okay, I thought you were seconding. Well, one thing we're discussing about like data collection and how since like certain organizations, certain teams don't have the resources required to like dedicate someone to both establish that agreement of what you're gonna collect and what outcomes it's gonna demonstrate when you do grants, but also just on the daily, just to set up those systems and structures. And like we realized that maybe it's possible to have some outside organization, or mostly like a platform or something that it could provide that service. So we focus only on the inputting, and then it like categorizes the sources for us, and it brings the requirements.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
We were talking in our group about the importance of involving participants as well as practitioners in the design of the evaluation process, in crafting the language, common language that makes sense to everyone. And Eric was talking about the process that he utilized at his center of actually having practitioners and participants watching video of the program in process and talking it conversationally about it and noting what language was coming up. Is that right, Eric? Is that fair to
Yep, that's fair to say. And I would add what a lovely job you were describing in your work of coming up with the focus questions and how there was a real collective process to identify the key questions you were going to use in surveys, and that you're field testing them with actual participating students to see how, if they feel comprehensive, if they feel true to them. So it was a real celebration of taking care with the process of the key focal areas and making sure they also resonate for funders.
Thank you.
One of our group discussed some of the challenges in terms of evaluating program success. And we talked about the difficulty in once we do surveys, we don't always get them back. One of the issues is the capacity. We don't have enough staff to really collect them, we get them out, but not being able to successfully get them back. And so one of our members suggested using Youth Advisory Council, who, of course, their voices would be very important in evaluating the program. So that was one of the solutions we came up with.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I'll go for my team. So we talked about a number of things, but a couple of the, things that we hit was utilizing storytelling, especially in like grant reports or just reporting to a funder, and being able to share the experience or impact from beginning all the way through the follow-up. Another thing was utilizing like teachable moments. So we really wanted to touch on the fact that it shouldn't necessarily be up to the direct service practitioners or the people more on the ground to have to come up with ways to get either funders or some of the higher up people to understand the need to highlight relationships. So how can we get those folks in the room and be able to have them learn more about the the importance through, whether it's like a presentation or having young people's voices at the table, or whether you have a reception or award ceremony or something like that, just getting those folks at the table and then presenting them the opportunity to, sit down and learn a bit more. So kind of meeting them halfway. Think I might be missing a few things that we talked about if my teammates want to jump in, but yeah.
You did a great job, Julia. Julia is a colleague of ours at the National Youth Employment Coalition. We also talked about social capital measures that allow you to transition between like storytelling and qualitative language to numbers and reports for those folks who like to see that, but social network analysis or ripple effect mapping or some other practical tools that folks can use. But we also talked about like the conundrum of thinking about creative youth development and then having to go back to the evaluation lens, which is often more valued in numbers. And it's like antithetical again, it's against kind of what we are saying is needed is creativity and how we think about what success is and how we measure that and how we can communicate that. Great job, Julie.
I don't think those are like mutually exclusive at all, I would say, because the implementation is creative and the approach, to those like quantitative points are creative still, but ultimately you could still measure outcomes, and again, understand participant feedback is really important and qualitative data, it has its place, but we could still measure outcomes without sacrificing program quality or implementation.
I definitely agree with Javier. Like, I feel like they're not mutually exclusive. I know I personally find it challenging sometimes to find where they're not mutually exclusive, but I know that they're not. And Julia had mentioned storytelling, which made me want to repeat what I had said like in my group with regards to the question of evaluation. Letting the teens talk about themselves in their own voices, like letting them tell us how they feel about themselves, where they're at the beginning of the program. I also think I said teens, but youth, but my work is with teens, so that's where my head is. But letting them talk freely about where they feel they are at the beginning of the program and at the end of the program. And maybe there is even a moment of like comparing and contrasting, like together with a trusted adult, not necessarily with everyone in the program, like that might feel uncomfortable for some, but those differences over time, that might not, it might be harder to reflect at the end of the program only and try to think, oh, like what did I learn? What did I experience? What did I do? But when you have like the beginning and the end, then you might be like, oh yeah, like I remember feeling like this, and I remember this, and I remember XYZ, and that moment of having the before and the after, like there might be things that come out that they didn't even realize that they experienced, that they learned, that they changed their perspective on. And yeah, I just wanted to echo a champion of youth voices, basically.
Piggyback off that, like, can we creatively like illustrate that some way? Like, is there a creative process around sharing those ideas, and like, can that be a part of the practice? Like, me and a coworker who's on this call, Holland, like we have chatted about the workshops that we're doing about having a thing that lives at our workshops that everyone can participate in, and it's the same thing, or is that maybe an evaluation tool of like maybe it's very specific. Yeah, so just piggybacking and saying yes, and how can we make that like a creative experience too?
One thing that
I feel like a lot of kids don't share like, hey, I'm feeling good, and it's like, well,
yeah, I think it's important to like get away from exclusively relying on participant feedback, because you could have actual generally measurable progress without them having to communicate it. And if you are able to create that, it's actually a clear like marker of program success. Like it could be something like what the thing we do, for instance, like we promote them collaborating externally, and then being like they actually will go somewhere else and run our program like the way like they become the implementations, and then through like a successful process to that, like you could actually, without asking them, you could measure what their experience was, and like like them being able to connect and being able to take a leadership role and successfully getting a new participant, like successfully getting a new participant through the project or the activity, like completion of activities that are framed around developments don't require participant feedback to see outcomes.
I want to jump in with an idea that was articulated actually so by Asia from No Easy Props in Los Angeles. She was actually saying it would make such a huge difference if funders listened to our community, actually engaged our community when making decisions. Because there's so much that the community can articulate about the benefits and the impacts and the outcomes, that the experience of kind of having to report on your own behalf is also a kind of complicated situation to be in. And actually, there's so much that the community knows and can share.
Can I jump in on that as a funder? We have gotten rid of reporting, and I think we talked earlier in the conversation about the importance of relationships in creative youth development. I think the same can be said with relationships with funders. And if you have trusting relationships and really want to know what works, what doesn't work, like we are as interested in what doesn't work as what does work, and in learning together. And I think then you can have much more honest conversations about it. I also want to lift up, somebody put a comment in the chat about, evaluation for whom, outcomes for whom. And I think that's so important. And in our group, we talked about the different levels of outcomes. What impact is it having for the individual, for the organization, for the staff, some of whom might have come up through the organization, for the community. So I just think there are different levels, and none of it is linear. And none of it is X plus Y equals Z. And so I think just naming the messiness of it and acknowledging that, I think, is really important.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. Those were great insights. I'm going to welcome back Brandon so he can answer some of his evaluation questions.
Yeah, no, thanks, Alana. So I kind of rushed through the presentation and left off the evaluation portion. In 2016, I went into a juvenile detention facility, and I met with a young person. And when I walked in, he went like this: "Hey, bro, just give me your survey. Just give me your survey, bro." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I don't have a survey." He's like, "Yeah, whatever. Just give me your survey." And so it shocked me to the core. In 2017, as a Black leader, I was faced for the first time with a funder who was asking me about social emotional outcomes and wanted to see and understand how we were measuring that. They suggested that we utilize an assessment tool, and that voice was ringing in my head. In 2019, I went to a conference where a funder named Tarek Ward was presenting, and he said, if you don't have evaluations, if you don't have evaluations in your budget when I see your your grant application, I'm not going to fund it. But he said, and it's not because I care about the outcomes like that, but I care that you care that your programs are operating efficiently. That was an interesting moment. So what we did was we embarked on this journey to figure out what synergistic evaluation looked like in our community. And what we found was that young people, as they showed up in space, really wanted to be creative. So we allowed young people to take that journey and to go about it in a few different ways, one being podcasts. So we take podcasts. Alana's actually part of this process. We take podcasts. Those podcasts are captured regularly with young people in intervals in different programs. And those podcasts become a journey for that young person, but it also becomes a real-time tool for us in our community to be able to share in real time what's going on. So as Alana's looking at these podcasts, she's able to report back and say, hey, Jennifer's not doing too well right now, right? She's just having this moment, and I feel like somebody needs to check in. Also, the kind of like ability to be able to celebrate and to look back with young people to say, you are growing, right? There's a young lady named Ellie that is right outside the window here. And recently she's like, hey, I don't even think that I'm growing. Like, I don't think I'm doing well. We were able to go back through this process, listen in your own voice as to what the process you've been going through of change. But this process, this whole thing lives on a website, a password protected website where our young people are able to then celebrate their voice and to celebrate their journey. We deal in media, so that's a little bit easier for us to do, and it's really synergistic with our community. But the goal was to figure out how we could actually show up in that space for young people, relationship centered. The other part of the issue was that we deal in the justice space. A lot of the grants are surrounded federal money. Federal money means federal methods, and we've chosen not to take that money because we're chosen to center relationship. So when there's a grant that is not synergistic with how we show up with young people, that doesn't allow us to center relationship in that way that we know our community needs. I'm not saying all communities need to get rid of surveys, but our particular young people are over surveyed and over analyzed. So we knew that that's something that we could not do. And we've passed on a lot of federal money as a result, and we will continue to pass on that money. But I think that there's an integrity that us as organizations need to have to our communities when it comes to evaluation. And from a funder's standpoint, I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement of lived experience, of honest communication from young people in particular about what and how programs are affecting their lives, and a myriad of things. But that's how we've navigated that really complex evaluation system, and we're still learning. We're every single day learning how to walk in that system to make it better, to continue to grow it for the development of relationship in our community. So thank you for that just space, Alana. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Brandon. And I want to welcome back our panelists to give us any closing thoughts after the hearing groups.
Oh, I liked that as a closing thought.
I was going to say the same thing, that I think sometimes we come at questions and solutions in such different ways that we fail to consider what it is. Different needs, different groups have different needs. And Brandon, what you just said is so important. And in my group, we were talking about consent and IRB, and I raised the question from a university perspective. We go through so much to get consent and approvals, but that may be triggering for some folks and so for some young people to be constantly monitored and evaluated and questioned about things that may or may not be relevant to the overall goals.
Yeah, I want to come and talk more with Brandon and the young people he's working with. I mean, I'm so inspired, and like I said, we have to be humble and check ourselves. I come from academia as well and over survey people because that's what we were supposed to do, right? But it's thinking about the harm that some of this work does to young people and how can we think differently, even with the best of intentions. All of us on this call, I'm sure, have. We want to make sure that we are not adding to the challenges that young people are having. So thinking about that requires the advocacy, though, on the level of folks who are funding this work, whether it's at the federal level or whether it's at the local level. How can we communicate what's being said here so that we can change and not have to turn down funds that are so critical to our programs, but we change what the requirements are so that the funds are more accessible and relevant for us?
And that's what we mean by honoring the lived experience. It's in every aspect of the work that we do, including from data gathering and collection and things like that.
I will say that after working in academia for a bunch of years, I was triggered just by hearing IRB just now. So so there's that. I also, just on a very personal note, I have a young adult son who is on the spectrum, and he wrote his college essay about being a specimen under a microscope. So I can only imagine kids who don't have the privilege of being a white middle-class kid, and how many times they are assessed by whom and without support. I do think to your point, Brandon, about not accepting federal funds, and I think, Javier, you put in that the federal requirements are borderline harmful. I would drop the borderline on that, and I think they just are harmful. And I have seen in a couple cases organizations that have turned down public dollars and have been able to get the money anyway with their own conditions. And that was local funding. It wasn't from the federal government. So the proximity is a little bit closer, but I would just encourage, sometimes if you push back, it might be an opportunity to change the system too and make it better for everyone. Not saying that that should be the burden of any organization, but I have seen that happen a couple times. And I have really nothing else profound to add to this. I'm just really happy to be in this space and to partner and learn from you all.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone who participated today. Sorry, 1 second. Thank you everybody for participating today, and sharing your thoughts. Please join us for our next town hall, which is going to be on June 20th, where we're going to discuss how creative youth development fosters entrepreneurship amongst young people. Please check our website and follow us on Instagram for more content and updates. Please reply to our follow-up survey so your insights can help us guide future events. Thank you again for everyone for participating. Thank you to our panelists and speakers, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day.